So how do you stay focused on long-term development goals when there always seems to be a new crisis to deal with? It's something I've heard a lot here at the World Bank IMF Spring Meetings, and I'm joined now by Paschal Donohoe, who is the Managing Director and Chief Knowledge Officer of the World Bank Group. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your program.
No problem. And first, what's a Chief Knowledge Officer?
So the World Bank Group is an organization that has a number of different foundations, but one of which is the expertise and knowledge that our staff and organization have built up over many, many decades working in the field of economic and development policy. And given the many challenges that we face at the moment, we need to make better use of that knowledge, the knowledge that all of our staff hold. One of my roles is to help them in doing that to benefit our clients.
I thought it meant you're the smartest person at the World Bank.
Anything but. This is a building rich in
Filled
knowledge
with smart people.
and
Yes,
very
I'm
smart
familiar.
people, and we work with incredibly knowledgeable and very smart people. And my humble role is to try and make those internal and external relationships as strong as possible.
Well, it's a good thing that there's that much knowledge in these buildings, because there have been many, many challenges.
Yes.
I want to start by talking about Iran. So the war in Iran is already weighing on global growth. We've heard that. What is the World Bank's role right now?
So the World Bank role is twofold. The first one is the role that we can play in providing immediate support to those that we work very closely with. And our President, Ajay Banga, has outlined that could be in the proximity of $22 billion, and that's funding we can make available quickly. Beyond that, we do have the ability to grow that support depending on circumstances, but then we would have to make some choices within our balance sheet to do that, but that can grow if needed. But then the second layer of that support that we can do is the knowledge role and the policy advice that we can offer, which is where myself and my colleagues are particularly involved. And that's advice that we can offer about the best response in the here and now, but critically, and you touched on this in our introduction, the heat off the fire is it's felt by so many at the moment, but there needs to be light for tomorrow as well. And we are working with our partners and our clients to say, how can we deal with the challenge of today, but not lose sight of tomorrow? And that's the big focus of the few days that we're having here.
No, and I want to ask about that, because it just seems like since 2020, frankly, and you've seen it all, even in your career within government in Ireland. I should mention you were the finance minister in Ireland. COVID into the war in Ukraine, here in the States, regional banks collapsing, now Iran. And you said choices, that's a key word. There's only so much money to go around. How do you stay focused on these long-term development goals, something as lofty as eradicating poverty, when there's always another fire to put out?
So as I make this point to you, I'm very conscious that in each period of crisis, there's great human suffering, great human need, particularly in crises that have had their origin in a pandemic or have their origin in conflict. So during these really hard moments, there are people who are really suffering in many different ways. And respecting that, I would also make the point that in the periods in between the crises, we have demonstrated resilience and the ability to recover in a way that many would have thought unlikely during those very, very hard moments. And I think it's really important to make that point, because we have to make the case for resilience. And so in how we maintain that balance here, it's then talking about goals that we believe are tangible and that can make a difference. So it's connecting 300 million more people to electricity in sub-Saharan Africa. It's helping 200 million farmers in their journey from subsistence to surplus. It's 1.5 billion more people having better access to primary health care. So it's about making those longer, medium-term goals, making them specific, making them tangible, and then we working with our partners, all of whom are here on these missions, and where these missions overlap with their missions, so we can make the most of what we all have. And that balance is really important at the moment.
So of course, the other thing that's been happening in the world over the past few years is that different partners have different goals.
Yeah.
Geopolitical tensions are real. And I'm wondering, the world is very different from even the COVID days
Sure.
in terms of international cooperation.
Yeah.
So to what extent has that become a greater challenge for your work?
So the context has undoubtedly changed, and to pretend otherwise would be to not be honest. Of course, the context has changed. And I'm a former Minister for Finance myself. I know that as finance ministers are making decisions around their budgets and their development budgets. These are very hard, these are very complex decisions. And you're aware of the changes that are now happening in reduced development budgets. But our role as a development institution is to recognise that reality and then to do two things. Firstly, to do our work as efficiently as possible. And secondly, then to make the case for our work. And that's what we're doing. We are talking to those parliaments, to those finance ministers about how their dollars, their euros, their yen can achieve more through working with us. And then we are recognising then that our work needs to be very focused on tangible outcomes, and we need to increase our cooperation with other partners and other multilateral development banks. And I hope you can see that theme and that background in these meetings here at the moment and the commitment that we have to doing that.
I want to weave together two other themes that I've heard a lot this week. One is, of course, AI,
Sure.
digital access and
Yep.
development, and the other is jobs.
Yep.
How do you ensure, as we do grow out AI systems in more countries, that billion plus young people that are aging into the workforce
Yep.
will have work waiting for them? How do we do those two things at the same time?
By identifying particular sectors that have the ability to meet those job needs and in which we judge that the AI impact is one that can still lead to job retention or, we believe, job growth. So let me give you an example by what I mean by that. We place an awful lot of focus in the World Bank Group on the importance of farming and food, access to food and its role with regard to job creation. And we're pretty certain actually that small AI and greater digital access will play a role in better meeting the food needs of our world and play a role in those jobs being better. And I was recently in Ghana, met lots of young people in Ghana, and many of them see their future in food. But they see their future in food and in farming being very different to what their fathers and mothers would have done. And AI and digital access is part of that, giving them advice on the best science for the work that they do, helping them get access to far better marketplaces and more efficient marketplaces than they would have had in the past. So we are well aware of the disruptive challenges that AI could pose, but we're equally convinced that if we think about our economy in terms of sectors, particularly within the developing world, from food to high-value manufacturing to tourism, that we can find a way in which we can use that technology in a way that's still very beneficial.
It seems that the inherent challenge is that to become part of the AI economy or the AI world and learn the skills that you're describing, you have to have the basics of connectivity, and there are still 700 million
Sure.
people on this planet who
Yep.
don't have electricity.
Absolutely.
So there's a big delta here.
Yeah,
How do you
I
see the
think
bank?
that's an incredibly important point, actually, to really recognise the reality of what it's like for so many of our fellow citizens across the world that don't have that access to electricity and even to water. A really important theme of our week here today. So how do we do it? Well, we do it by making it an intentional goal. And if you look at Mission 300, a goal that many of my colleagues have done great work on here within the World Bank Group, we've a goal of collecting 300 million more people in Africa to electricity, and that's their schools, it's their homes, it's their primary care centres, and then using that as the foundation where, for example, then we can improve their access to primary health care, improve their access to the world of skills. And that kind of goes back to your earlier question regarding how we can use digital access as the kind of point of entry then to so many other services and a standard of living. And that's a big focus of what we have to do.
Do you think that the bank has made enough use of private sector money, and how further could you explore partnerships with the private sector to make these projects a reality?
Yes, I do, but we're far more ambitious to do more. And if you look at our co-financing progress, so that is our relationship both with the private sector and with other international partners, we've seen big strides forward in that. But we have to do more. And why do we want to do more? We want to do more because it goes back to the goals that you and I talked about there a moment ago. That to maximize the number of jobs we want to create, the private sector will be creating 4 out of every 5 of those new jobs. And yesterday morning, myself and many of my colleagues in the World Bank attended a private sector innovation lab that was co-convened by President Ajay Banga, which is all about this. And their work is having a big impact on our work. And the theme, in fact, of this week is all about the role that regulation and good policy can play in being catalytic then, which is a big question at this point in our meetings, a big word. But what I mean is enabling then higher levels of capital investment from the private sector in our work.
As the multilateral world established in the post-World War II era, largely by the United States and its allies, starts to shapeshift, some people say reform, certainly look for new alliances and partnerships. What do you see the near and long-term future of the bank and its relevance being?
So that moment 8 decades ago, where many leaders across the world came together in Bretton Woods, they were looking at a few different things, I think, in a context of the aftermath of a war. They were looking at how can multilateral cooperation play a role in advancing the needs of countries. And by multilateral cooperation, we mean how countries engage and cooperate with each other. And what they recognized in doing that also is that institutions are a very efficient way of doing that. So when I think about where the World Bank Group stands today, it's about us as an institution stepping up to the needs that our partners and our clients have, which is what the staff of this institution are completely focused in doing. So what we want to do and what we are doing is focus on jobs. Jobs isn't abstract. Jobs isn't some theoretical dimension floating around in the just in academic textbooks. It's about the tangible difference that we can make to economies growing and to the life outcomes of the people that we serve. So we are changing our institution. We're making it a group, an overall organization focused on a few big aims. And those aims are ones that we want to meet the needs of our clients and also of those who fund our work. And that's a big part of what this week's all about.
Paschal Donohoe, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's lovely to meet you.
I hope you have a great week.
Yeah, thank you.